Welcome to Becoming Untriggered, a podcast brought to you by psychodynamic coaches and parents of three, Lavinia Brown and Andrew Lynn.
Together we normalise and unpack common challenges faced by couples and parents, explore how these could be symptoms of unprocessed trauma, and support you with the tried and tested tools for you to show up as the mum or dad, partner, and person you deserve to be. Welcome to Becoming Untriggered podcast. Today we're looking at managing more than one child and how that can bring up triggers in you, not only because it's exhausting, time, effort, and energy-wise, but in other ways.
We've got experience with this because we've got 3 children. Sometimes I feel like it's just spinning plates, just trying to avoid a catastrophe, sometimes going to the one that's got the biggest need at that point in time. So it's challenging, like you said. There's an energy challenge, there's a time challenge, there's an effort challenge. But also, if you look deeper than that, there are lots of subtle things, like how having more than one child and their birth order can potentially form their character or the adaptive behaviors that we talk about.
Definitely. I think everyone has heard of the difficult middle child syndrome, whether that's the second child out of 3 or the third child out of 4. There's also obviously the youngest child. We've all had experience of our own siblings, if you've got them, and also we can see it being played out in our own kids. So the helpless, inverted commas, youngster, the one that's babied, or the one that the elder children feel is babied. It's not the same thing. And the eldest child who kind of has to be a little bit more capable than the others, just because it's about time and effort and energy, like you said, and how that child can then become maybe a little bit bossy, a little bit mini adult.
Yeah, there's also the single child. And sometimes the eldest child is the golden child. It also depends where they fit in like the hierarchy of the grandkids sometimes. So it's really complex.
Yeah, so I was the first grandchild and the first child.
Special, very special child.
Well, maybe I got more attention because it was new. But as a result, I also had to be, I think, inappropriately capable and together. And I know that we've unconsciously, I don't know how unconsciously it was, but our eldest certainly had to do a lot more because just they're the most capable child of the children that you have. It's all relative. But I remember that child saying to us many times, I never got carried because it wasn't an option.
Well, they did for the first couple of years, but then afterwards their perception is then I'm always watching somebody else be carried.
Yeah, there's one pushchair and there's one set of arms. If they were lucky enough to have 2 sets of arms free, they might have got the second set of arms, but they were always the one that was more advanced relative to the other 2. So yeah, you have to grow up quite quickly. And I think that's difficult. And I know that that's difficult because I experienced it myself, but that doesn't mean that you don't end up doing it with your eldest just because you've got a handful of baby who's screaming to be fed. That elder one has to put their needs on hold slightly.
I think that's just natural, some of it. I don't think it's even something that we do as parents. I just think that's a side effect of birth order sometimes. If you're born first, you get all the attention for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and then suddenly something else comes into your life and steals your attention. So that's going to have an impact on who you are as a character.
Well, people say that it is classed as trauma, actually, especially if that gap's quite big. If you've had 4 or 5 years on your own,
I think there's always going to be an unconscious wrestle for attention at that point in time. And then maybe depending on the character of the baby that comes, the elder one will go, okay, I need to change my character in some way.
Yeah. And obviously a baby doesn't have many needs other than the really basic, I want to be fed and I want to go to sleep now. But I've had friends that have said to me that their children have gone, when the baby, inverted commas, is 1, okay, can we give them back now?
Yeah.
Because suddenly that baby's developing character. Actually, that's just reminded me. I think a lot of children do this as well. Our eldest would get into the tiny baby carrier and the baby seat often. Obviously, they were way too big for it. It was coming out of all the sides. but it was this need to be babied. And obviously part of you recognizes, they want to get the attention that the baby's getting. But at the same time, you don't want to encourage that because they're not a baby. So it's very difficult trying to get them to own their role in the family and obviously get attention for that without that attention being linked to responsibility.
I do think actually there are different characters of babies, because I have some clients that the baby comes into the house and suddenly it's like an explosion. The baby's needy, the baby's loud, they're crying, they're asking for attention. And that then defines the role of the elder one. Rather than a nice, sweet baby that doesn't make any noise and is perfect, the other one will have to create some noise to get some attention.
We experienced the first example, first time round, but then the second time round, I think, and again, I've had lots of people say this, the third one just goes along with it. They don't have room for needs of their own because everyone's busy. And yet conversely, our third is probably the neediest. I don't know whether that's making up for lost time or something, but I wanted to just mention that when you can get an easy second baby, that often encourages the first to become a bit of a mummy's helper, looking after the baby, because they kind of can, because it's an easy baby, but that's not massively helpful either. So I think what we're saying is there are ways that your children can adapt, which may not always be healthy, may be super helpful at the time, which is why you take advantage of it. Amazing. I've got another set of hands. I've got a capable little mummy's helper that I can use. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be healthy for that child in the long run.
Yes, characters can be created, and it's our job as parents to be aware of this dynamic. Make sure it's not fixed in stone. Make sure it doesn't become part of the person's or the predominant characteristic of our children's personality.
Well, you never know, really, do you, what's nurture and nature? And yet at the same time, as parents, you are 1,000% responsible for the nurture part. So it's really important to be aware of any traits that might be developing in your child that aren't necessarily characteristics, which is really difficult to tell, but especially when it comes to ways of getting attention. So, for example, many people, I think, have had experiences of more than one child vying for being one is good, one is bad. Because remember, children look for attention in any way that they can get it, whether that's being reprimanded the whole time or praised all the whole time. It doesn't matter. That's connection. That is the energy that they are seeking to feel that they're important, worthy. And I know that we had that going on with two of ours. One was the naughty, rebel, bit of a bully towards the other ones, didn't really want to connect physically or verbally. He was quite a bit of a scapegoat, bit of the outsider, and one that was extra good and therefore got a lot of praise. And we noticed that quite early on. They picked their own silo, because that's the other thing about kids. You'll never find in a family of more than one child the same pattern being taken up by two or more children. And it's not always the eldest one that takes the lead. So with us, that good, bad child was quite obvious for a long time, and it was really difficult to manage. But I'm glad to say it's no longer there, which is I'm actually really proud of, because it wasn't healthy for either of them. And do you remember how we managed it? I think we were really aware of giving attention, like reprimanding the one that made themselves out to be bad, inverted commas, and trying to create space for them not to be bad, and also hanging back on praising the one that had taken the good slot.
I think some of it with us, I think some of it was also external situation. We moved country, we moved school, and that actually shifted the dynamic for our children in some ways.
And actually, I remember, I think we also praised the one that was, inverted commas, good for being bad. Like we almost unconsciously
gave them room to
encouraged. Yeah. And when the one that was quite good and quite passive spoke up for themselves and almost actually hit the other one for a change, it was obviously not well done, but they didn't get punished for it. Oh, I get how you did that. And it was validated. So it was being the opposite with both that evened out that quite uneven pattern. Another way that they can show up this dichotomy in terms of the way that you've adopted to get attention can be one child is more extrovert, one child is more shy, one child is more anxious, one child is more strong and more of a leader. Again, I think that we've definitely experienced that, and I think we still are with one of ours, which is really difficult because when you see these labels that they've given themselves in order to get attention, and you naturally give them attention, especially if it's a needy trait like being anxious or being ill or being shy, of course you want to be there to support them. But that can then reinforce the other one's behavior. It can backfire, and giving a child what they need sometimes isn't going to be the right thing to do in the long term, because it'll encourage that behavior and maybe encourage the other child who feels they don't have space to be themselves to distance themselves even more.
It's difficult, but it's about doing the hard thing as a parent, which is sometimes not giving them what they want. It's giving them what they need, which might not be attention from the dysfunctional behavior. And it can go both ways. It can be based on achievement. So if you've got a performing child that's doing well at things and you are praising them for their external achievements, it can be about praising them for not achieving anything. It can be about unconditional love rather than carrying on that pattern of conditional love and rewarding external achievement.
Yeah, so basically you want to be aware of how you are reacting with that child and modifying it as much as you can to try and be equal with more than one child, which is really difficult. And hopefully from that place, your children's true characteristics will come out of that. But even that's difficult because those characteristics might trigger you, because that's an area that you haven't yet worked on, or it's the opposite type of person to you. I know that I had that with all three of ours. One of them was very at ease with their body, very embodied, very sensual almost, very confident in their body. And I didn't even realize really that that was still a thing for me, that I wasn't. But the way that they were triggered me. And actually the way that they were with you, that physical connection that you had with them was quite triggering for me. Another child is so disorganized. I am pretty much on the OCD end of organized. I think one of my friends called me Olympic level organized, which I'd probably describe as anal. And that's a real trigger, and I have to really hold back. And you're always telling me they're a child, but I can't help expecting what I need from them. I want them to be more organized because it does my nut in to be constantly finding lost things, picking up things that should be in a place that they're not. And then the other child, I grew up having to be as the eldest, I think that was linked to it, but it was also my parents' wound, having to be really thoughtful, really aware of other people's needs, how I had to perform in order to not to ruffle anyone else's feathers. And we've got one child that just could not really care, which I love. It's brilliant. I remember them saying once, what was it? It was near Christmas. And they came down. We were going to go to a really nice restaurant. I said, is that what you're wearing to go out for dinner? Yeah. Okay. Could you wear something that you don't normally wear during the day? No, it's comfortable. And I really had to go and recognize and kind of ask myself, well, why do I want them to be smart? It's because I've always had to be smart to make a special occasion. And I like doing that. I like marking things out as special. Clothes is one of the way that I do that. But, you know, who am I to impose that?
Yeah, they don't have the
my
same,
child?
they don't feel the same way.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're talking about the crux of parenting there. It's about recognizing what is you, what is your trigger, what is your baggage, what is your stuff, and dealing with that before you impose it on the children. All three of the kids trigger me in similar ways, not necessarily with the physicality, but with the need for attention, constant attention. And then similar to you, another one of our children is, you could say, ungrateful and rude sometimes. And that triggers me when I'm doing things for them all the time for no thanks. part of it is a desire to get something back now. So part of it is, well, do I need to teach this person some manners? But part of it is definitely, I was taught to say thank you. I was taught to be grateful. So I felt like I should do those things. And they don't.
I was talking with one of my clients about this in a session this week and saying we can't control our children. We can't make them have manners or be good people. Your child might be an asshole or a child that you would view as an asshole. And actually, it's our job to, obviously, you're not going to let them, hurt other people physically and be like a psycho, but they might just be someone that's very independent, but quite selfish, knows what they want from life, and they're not going to stop at anything to get that. That's your child. We can't mold them into anything else. That's not our role. And so it's quite hard to let go sometimes.
Yeah, it is. But I also think that if somebody is selfish, narcissistic or whatever, if they have those character traits, it's probably your responsibility. You probably created that character. I don't know how many kids are born assholes.
I don't know if you can change it, though. When you give space for that behavior, I believe, and I think that's how one of our children has changed. When you kind of allow it, you allow the inverted commas bad behavior, they no longer need to put that behavior on to get attention, and then it calms down. So I think it's actually about not clamping down on it, almost ignoring it, like, okay, you're being an asshole, cool. This will pass, whatever. You're not going to get attention for it or not. They stop.
I think one of the ways we have helped that child is they're quite angry. In some ways, we've allowed them to project their anger onto us, totally. Right? And we've been okay with that. We're like, you don't need to love us. You don't need to want to be with us. In a way, that's projected their anger onto a safe space. And it means the rest of their life is blooming. They're like getting on amazingly at school, friends, loving life, brilliant. And that anger has been directed at us, and actually it's dissipated. So the anger, just by being there and being safe and saying, it's okay, we don't need anything from you, we are here for you, that has healed a lot of the anger.
I completely agree. And it's like a bigger version of what the parenting experts, inverted commas, talk about. They talk about short bursts of anger, having a tantrum, having a meltdown, and holding space for that until it goes. This is a longer version, which is really hard because it's really exhausting and relentless, and you don't get any praise for it. But it does work. I think we can both say it works.
Yeah. The other thing we've got to be wary of, not just birth order, not just children's character, is projecting our childhood experiences and our wounds onto our children to form their character. So I've got somebody I'm working with at the moment that was told something specific by their parents all the time that was actually quite a positive thing, although they didn't take it as a positive thing. I can mention it. He said that his parents always called him a natural at things. And for him, he took that as, what, you don't think I'm working hard, or you saying I don't need to work hard? Because it was an unconscious wound of his that was driving him. He would never say that to his kids. He says the opposite. He says, you're a hard worker. It's basically just the opposite side of the same coin. They might think, what, you mean I'm not talented? Sometimes we can take something that we think is a positive, that we're trying to create or form this positive character, but actually it has the opposite effect. It just pigeonholes, or it has actually the reverse effect on sometimes.
Is there anything that you were called?
Yeah, I've got a mixture of golden child and lazy.
That's the natural. You were indirectly made to feel that you were natural at everything. I think it's not until you leave the family unit energetically or physically, and I mean that's a very important point, because you didn't leave the family energetically until much after. And also, if you're the golden child, why would you leave energetically? You're being fed by people that adore you. There's absolutely no reason to. The shadow side of that, I guess, is that if you feel you're a natural at everything, then you kind of want to be seen in your badness. You want to be seen in the ways that you're not. And that can create you going the other way. It's like, no, look, I'm failing at this. I'm not doing well here. Look at me, see me. Oh no, but you're amazing. No, what do I have to do to show you that I'm not golden?
There was such a contrast between the golden child, which is what I was treated as by a lot of the women in my family, and then my dad leaving and basically rejecting me. So I was like a golden child, but I had this deep wound of rejection and that I'm not good enough that was inside of me. And that was a hard thing to manage. Yeah, I needed probably a bit less of the golden child, and then being allowed to explore the rejection and the reality of my father leaving.
I think one thing's important, what you've said, is gender roles. That's another way in which it's difficult to bring up. Maybe you have all your children are of one gender. Maybe you have a mix of genders, and that they bring up their own challenges. I've been really aware, because you were a golden child, to not create that in our son. And yet I do treat my son differently than I treat my daughters. And even though I really try not to, I think I am more lenient with him. And yet also, conversely, harsher, because I'm so aware of this wound that I don't want to create. And my daughters, I'm probably harsher on in that I expect more of them, because you don't want them to fail in the ways that you did. And you also want them to succeed with the tools that you learn. It's almost like you want to pass on your tools to a girl because you know that the world is hard. We still live in a patriarchy. So you want them to be strong and to be able to deal with bullies and to be able to rise up whatever ladder they want to rise up with the tools that they need. And so there's this wound-driven, in the end, fear-driven need to pass on these tools, which may be completely irrelevant to them, and actually sow seeds of fear instead of protect them. So I think the ways that you deal with the opposite gender and the same gender is problematic, and you've got to be really aware of it.
I think for a man, it's probably the opposite. The go-to for a man, or certainly for me, is to let the girls get away with everything because they're like princesses. The boy is to push him, because that's what my experience is of the world, that it's hard. It is hard to be a man, right? It's competitive to be a man. So you've got to be strong. You've got to work hard.
And then love language comes into it. I heard someone saying, don't do anything for your children that they can do for themselves. If your language is doing things for other people, then it's going to be really hard to pull back on that when that's how they're slightly manipulating you. How do you be that caring, connecting adult parent and be affectionate? And how do you give them that love without your love language playing into their wound?
It's very difficult. You've got to be aware of the needs of your child, which are all going to be different. It's not about really your love language of how you give love. That's how you're comfortable in giving love. It should be about how does my child need to receive love, and then I adapt my parenting to that. If you're not capable of doing that, then you're creating an adaptation in your child straight away. One of our children said to me the other day, if you need something, you can ask us, because they were asking indirectly. And they said, well, everyone gives love differently, so I can't expect to receive that. They are already people-pleasing. They're like, I can't expect that. I can't expect what I want because my parents can't give that for me, so I have to just take something else. I think they're pointing out our limitations up until now, but the point of being a parent is to see that and not get triggered and not go, well, I'm a bad parent. It's about, okay, I see that pattern in you. We've created that. I'm sorry about that. You don't have to do that.
Yeah. So of course you're going to go for the easy option, but as you said earlier, that's not necessarily what's best for that child. It's bloody exhausting being aware of every single potential pothole, and obviously you're going to miss millions of them because we're flawed human beings.
How do we pick our way through this minefield, right? That is the question. The first point of action is you have to be conscious of what's actually going on here. The only way you can be conscious is if you are present and you are conscious of your own behaviors. You have to heal the trigger. So you've got to do the work yourself. You've got to investigate your past. You've got to investigate your adaptive behaviors. You've got to understand how your parents' actions created the reactions in you. You've got to understand your behaviors. You've got to heal your wounds. You've got to heal your triggers, right? And only then are you in a position where you can see your child's behavior for what it is.
I think a really important question is, how did you get love? How did you try and get love? How did you not get love? Yeah. Just those three questions, if you ask yourself, that will reveal the limitations on the part of your parents, because they are flawed human beings. We're not blaming them. We're not parent bashing. And it will also show probably how you adapted who you were in order to get that love. So those three questions, I think, are really good pointers if you're not quite sure where to start.
Yeah, they are a good place to start. And it's often in the bigger picture, in the healing journey, the work we do with the inner child often shows up a lot of this stuff for my clients. Because when you connect with your inner child and you see what you didn't get as a child and what your needs are, what the needs of your inner child are, right? You start communicating with that child differently. That's when you can see some of the dysfunctional behaviors that you're actually doing with your children now.
Yeah, I'd say they both need the same thing. You can ask yourself those three questions, and the limitations that came up and the ways that you adapted will show you the wounds of the inner child. We're both going back to the inner child. So how did your birth order affect you? What are some triggers that you see coming up in respect to your children's birth order that feels uncomfortable? How did your childhood affect you? How did your siblings and the amount of tension they got? We didn't touch on that, but I think I'd like to do another episode on that, sibling interaction, because it's a real thing, sibling imprints and perceived unfairness of attention and love. And just being aware of how you need love and how you go about connecting with your child. Is it really healthy? Or are you using that child to be the parent that you never had? So many layers. So it's awareness. And this awareness only comes when you look back at the limitations of your own childhood.
With the consciousness, you can see what's going on. And our journey was about healing our childhood wounds in adulthood. And that's the same for our clients. But we've got kids and so have our clients. And the key to doing this work and becoming conscious and untriggered is that you can actually change it in real time. You can change your child's experience, even if they've got adaptive behaviors, even if they're playing these characters that aren't authentic. If you start now, by the time they leave your house, you can create space for them to be more authentic. Maybe if they've still got some baggage when they leave home, absolutely fine. But you can heal a lot of this stuff in real time, which is a great gift for your children.
If what we discussed was helpful, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. For more of the same, check out my social media, The Inner Child Healing Expert, or to work with me, go to laviniabrown.com.
You can find me on andrewlynn.net or Life Coach for Dads on Instagram. We work with both individuals and couples. If there are any topics you'd like us to cover, please reach out. Thanks for listening.